The more important confidence is actually a deeper confidence that you can develop. And that's not connected to context or competency per se. Mm-hmm. It's more of an internal competency where, like, you will hear the statement, a lot of people who are confident, they will say is that, well, I believe that I can figure it out. For example, multifamily investors will come from different professions. They come into the space. Most of them will wait until they develop all the competence. They know this thing inside out. They will spend years, months and years researching this, right? Which is okay. But then somebody will come in, they've literally just heard it on a podcast that there's a way to invest like this. They will come in, they will jump in, talk to some very influential people, and they will build connections and relationships. And before you know it, within 6 months, they have like a 300 unit. Like, it's the most mind-boggling thing. They had virtually very little. They just found out about this thing, but they had more of a confidence in themselves.
The Real Estate Wife Show, and I'm your host, Pinky Loomba. Today, my special guest is my good friend, Faisal Ensaun, and this is our second recording together. Faisal is a certified high-performance coach since 2015. He's also the co-author of Coaching Mastery Community, where he helps teach other coaches to hone and further develop their coaching abilities and their business practice. Faisal has coached over 2,000 individuals with diverse background. He runs the Space Creators community, where he holds weekly high performance and personal development sessions in a small group setting. He guides and teaches people to create the space for their potential, vision, and inner self to surface. Today, we'll discuss how fear determines people's actions. Last week was how to tap into your high potential. So we thought this is like a relevant topic to cover in this session. Welcome, Faisal. I'm super excited to have you back with me today.
Excited to be here. So excited for our conversation.
Thank you. So I would like to discuss with you today's economy or the times that we are in today. People are so fearful. It's a fear of, I would say, more like a survival fear. And I have also heard this quote from Warren Buffett, like he says, when people are fearful, get greedy. So let's talk about that. What is your thought process there? It's all the fear in the economy, how to use that for best of our benefit.
I love that quote. Not that I like being greedy. I look at that, but I know there's some humor in there when Warren Buffett talks about it. I think fear itself is a very interesting condition. And I think the world that we're in right now with the way the economy is, it's normal to have a certain amount of fear. Because when things are not going up and people notice it, then people pause. Like in the real estate world, a lot of people are noticing that. Realtors are struggling. Real estate investors who are trying to raise capital, they are seeing a slow, in a sense, a hesitation towards kind of investments. And I talk to them on a consistent basis. So I'm getting a lot of direct feedback. This morning, I talked to a real estate investor whose focus was capital raising, and I can share later what his thoughts were. But essentially, when fear comes in, now the problem is not the fear. The problem is how you respond to the fear. Because you will see a variation of it. There are people who will get, when they feel fear, they will just look for validation outside of themselves. So what do we normally do when we have something going on in the economy where there's the market crash is happening or recession is happening, whatever is happening? What do? We go sit around a bunch of people and we talk about it. And who do we talk to? Usually it's people who are like us, who are in our own environment. And now this is where the key things happen. So there are two forces here. One is your own internal thought process and how you process your emotions, your inner world, and the other one is your external world. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have confidence in your inner world, you're looking for outside validation very quickly. And so you will go in your environment, you will go seek what's happening. Like, give me some relief because I'm afraid. So you'll go sit around your family, friends. Now, depending on how they are, they might take you in a couple of directions. So if you don't have internal confidence, you don't have knowledge, you don't have all that stuff, then you're sitting around assuming that those people are afraid as well. They will just confirm each other's biases. And if they're afraid, they're like, oh, no, stay away from investments, stay away from pretty much everything. And then you get influenced by that. Now, let's suppose it's another scenario. A couple other scenarios will come. Let's say you don't have a lot of, like, you're still concerned. There's a lot of fear and all sorts of happening internally, and you haven't actually figured out your thought process around this, but you are around the right people. You're around people who are actually moving their business forward in times like this, who are making better investments, who are looking at opportunities. You get around those people, you can actually borrow their confidence and knowledge and all sorts of things. That's why a lot of trainers and coaches will say you're an average of 5 people around you. Because as soon as you go around them, often it's like, okay, well, these people are doing well. Why can't I do well? What are you doing differently? And you start to get curious. You ask questions. You start to find out, like, what are they doing differently compared to other people that I know? Why aren't they as afraid? In fact, why are they excited about this time? Like, what did something off here? Did they know something that I don't know? So that actually takes you towards that curiosity path. But then now this third variation is even a better situation to be in, is that if you know how to manage your own emotions, if you can think through things, if you can look at patterns, then first of all, assume that's why Warren Buffett's quote makes a lot of sense to me. When everybody gets afraid, pay attention, because most people will gravitate towards the majority. They will just know, they will by reaction gravitate towards whatever everybody else does. So automatically, whatever opportunities are there, whatever chances are there, and also, like, when you're looking at economy and these things, a lot of business owners know this, is that pretty much everything goes on sale. So if you have cash, or you have capital, or if you have if you can take advantage of those opportunities, everything goes on sale. From the business owners who are like really big on baseball cards, like they're doubling down on all these, and they go for a lot, like anywhere from, I don't know, a few $1,000s to millions, to like antiques, to anything. People want to sell things because they're afraid. Something is going to go wrong. I need to have liquidity. So if something goes wrong, so they're preparing for worst case scenario in a sense. So the opportunities are there. Things are going on sale. Now, who takes advantage of that? And I think if you think of it logically, it's the person or the group of people who are actually stepping back from all this frenzy, and they're like, okay, what's actually happening? Okay, I can be afraid. Let me process this. Let's look at the pattern. And when you look at the economy goes through its upswing and downswing. And COVID and other things might have accelerated things a little bit, but this would have happened anyway. And there are businesses, and I know them firsthand because I've talked to some of my clients that have businesses like that. They have been literally preparing for this over a decade. For over a decade, it's like, this is where we make the most amount of our money.
That's true. Yeah.
They don't look to 2 years out. They don't look 3. They look at decades out. And that's why you will hear a lot of times that this might be the biggest transfer of wealth. You will hear that over and over. You might hear that, you will find the best opportunities around this point. Now, you might hear that, you're like, how the hell is that possible? But it goes down to human behavior and human mind. It's like when we're afraid, most people will reactively do certain thing. And then there are a few people who, if they're conscious enough, they do different things. So for example, even for me, and I'm not just speaking theoretically from other people, the accounts, I've doubled down on my businesses. Why? Because I know that this will be the time where a lot of business owners will shrink back. They will if they're starting their business, they will give up. They're like, this is not the right time. If they have done it for a while, they will stay in their zone. They won't take much risk, or they won't go towards other opportunities. So this is the time where the opportunities are wide open. And I've seen that I was sharing this with you, Vinky, before. That I've been working towards collaborations. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had an event. a lot of coaches or trainers might be like, oh, the economy is off. Maybe you're not. No, the coaching world is exploding because there people are afraid.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And
those are
then,
some like high level thoughts around it.
yeah, I mean, I have a few questions for you, whatever you shared with me, but I would like to say one thing over here. The right mind always sees it that we are in the right time.
Yeah.
When I say the right mind, because the mind that responds, not reacts. So every time is a right time. There is no waiting, because if you're waiting, you're going to keep on waiting all the time, because you're on that mode. You're in the wait mode. So you mentioned something very interesting. You said, we are always looking for validation. And because our inner code is not strong enough, or we do not have enough confidence, I'm going to ask you that as a follow-up question. But for right now, I'm going to ask you the question is about the validation. Why always people are looking for validation?
Yeah. I think it's human, to be honest. It's not a negative thing per se, but it just depends. So for example, what I mean by validation in this case are two. There's thought validation, there's emotion, but mostly it's emotional, I would say. So here, like, I'll give you a simple scenario. So Vinky, have you ever, like, these are funny things human beings do that like we all kind of, this common to us. Like, have you ever like walked around and somebody has put something somewhere and you've tripped on it or something has happened? And it's like, damn you, whoever.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
So and this is Dr. Brene Brown talks about it. These are funny moments that teach us a lot about human beings. So in that moment, what happens? You have a buildup of energy, right? Whether it's like pain, like you stepped on something, you feel pain and your emotions of frustration come out, pain come out. It's like, and we want to discharge, right? The discharge comes in the form of, damn you. But now think about it. If somebody was paying attention, they would have noticed. Like if you were present enough, you would have noticed that there's stuff around you, but you're probably in a hurry, or I'm probably in a hurry. And I do a couple of things and I kind of trip over something or something happens. It's a buildup of emotion. So when the buildup of emotion happens with most people, and it can be any kind of emotion, we want to release it. And because we're a social species, we release it in our environment towards other people around us. So we point finger, or we blame, or we say the government, the politicians, the business owners, the wealthy, whoever we can blame. It's a buildup of fear. It's a buildup of frustration. It's a buildup of anger. We don't know how to process it. So we're looking for an avenue for it. And most of us don't have productive avenues. So for example, some people might go out and work out. That might help in the process, or they have creative outlets, or they actually leverage that energy to do something else, or they just process it simply. They understand that this is a discomfort that's just going to move through it. But now a good majority of people, and there's this one spiritual teacher put it this way, that we live in the emotional dark ages right now. And the reason for what she said is that most people are not aware of what's actually happening in their own physiology. Like there's a biochemical reaction that happens. Your body's trying to talk to you to pay attention, and you feel it as a discomfort. So you misinterpret the signal. The signal is that, hey, there's pain, there's discomfort, pay attention. Something is happening. It's like if you were hunger and you panic. if you had hunger and you panic, and babies do that, right? When a baby is just newborn, they don't know what's happening. So when the hunger comes, they will panic, and that's how they communicate too. So they'll cry. As adults, we know that food comes up, like as long as we know generally everything is fine, we don't panic, even though it's the same exact pain. Now, most
I do. When I get hungry, I need to eat.
we feel it though, right? We get cranky, but we don't panic in the way, for example, a baby does, because they don't know this yet. The same thing with our emotions. So when I say validation, we need somebody to tell us that we're okay. The problem is that when you go around other people, nobody's okay.
That's so true.
And so when a bunch of people talk with each other, it's like, these people are to blame. That makes it bigger. The energy, the collective energy becomes bigger. And it's now you just created a new mind that's more in pain. A new consciousness that's more in pain.
Yeah, but I wanted to say one thing over here. Sorry to interrupt you, because it's not a validation. If you look in a bigger picture, it's just like, to me, it's like you're confirming, it's a confirmation, like other person is doing the similar thing, and then maybe his issue is bigger than mine. So that gives you solace. Oh, okay, that person is dealing more than me. I'm okay wherever I am. So that's the kind of validation it is. It's not like somebody's giving you gold medal. Okay, you're doing something really good.
No,
Which is never going to happen,
that's a
Yeah.
different kind of validation, but even that's the same thing. Like that's an emotional validation. Even if somebody gave you a gold medal, what do you feel better, right? It engages a different part of your emotions. You feel better. Now, the challenge is that this depends. Like, how do you process your own emotions? How do you deal with them? And what kind of people do you interact with? That determines the outcome of your behavior. So, like, if you don't know how to process your emotions, you're already in a negative state. Now you go around other people who don't know how to manage themselves. And they have all these thoughts that are connected to those emotions. Oh my God, something's going to go wrong. This is going to go wrong. I mean, think about the beginning of pandemic. What happened? Toilet papers. It's like that was panic. That was full-blown panic. And out of everything, people go towards toilet paper. Whatever the case was, it was funny. One of my relatives, he had actually stored his whole garbage. He's like, do you want some? I'm like, really? Like, it'll be okay. So it's just we do funny things, and then but this shows up in cycles in the economy, and people know that. Like people who've been through like the upswing and downswing of the economy in their business and investments, they understand this stuff because they know that they need to operate in both the downturn and upturn. And if they understand that, that means the only way they're going to have a business, like you said, in whatever the economy is, they need to adjust, they need to pivot, they need to understand how it works. Now, if you haven't gone through that process, you will panic. And if you panic, what do? You start to sell a bunch of stuff, you start to react, you start to kind of look for people who don't know what they're doing, and you start to take action based on that. And then we might think that, oh, well, that's just how people, but there are reasons behind it. We're not taught how to kind of sit with the discomfort and be okay with it. Just feel the discomfort. People are and that's why actually it's interesting when you actually work with investors, business owners. They actually are very aware of their growth. Maybe not fully to a lot of them, but the ones who are, they know, like they're really good at pivoting. Like they will feel the panic, they will feel the thing, but they're like, okay, what do I do? They leverage the same emotion for a different thing. Okay, I need to adapt. Versus let me hide or let me just react. Like automatically they've gone through so many of these ups and downs that they've developed this adaptation to it. And so this is what happens. And by the way, the same thing happens in our personal life. Like you think of any drama that happens in anyone's life. Somebody will call or somebody will bring the negative news, and before you know it, if you see that everybody's operating at the same wavelength, they will just feed that drama. They will just keep feeding the same energy, that same negativity, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But when you kind of move through the whole thing, you come to the end of it, you're like, this wasn't such a big deal. Why did it look like it was such a big deal?
At that time, yes.
Yeah, at that time, right? In retrospect, it never looks like a big deal.
No.
But at that time, because everybody's feeding the same thing.
And you're in the situation.
You're in the situation, and our predicament is, and this is why people say, like, who are you around? What kind of thoughts do you hear? What kind of energy are you around? What kind of people are you around? It makes a big difference.
That's true. I agree with that 100%. And earlier you're talking about the inner confidence. Can you shed some light on that? How can somebody develop an inner confidence, believing in what you think is right, or believing in yourself that the intuitions that you're getting, those are the right things. You do not need somebody else's validation in order to take an action.
I think it's one of those things that you kind of build on. It's an ongoing thing. It's not like you get to a point where like I'm fully confident, and like it's a process where you grow towards. It's a wisdom you develop, but there are certain categories. So, for example, I think I put it in two. I've done a couple of training videos around this. 3 categories you can look at confidence. One might be there's this loop we call in psychology, which is the one many people might be aware of. Maybe not consciously, but that's what it is, called competence confidence loop. where in any given space, if you develop competence, you will naturally develop confidence. And that confidence feeds the same competence because you want to learn more, because you get feedback from your environment. So, for example, this is a very common thing, like you will meet somebody who's really good at what they do, like in whatever profession. They could be a doctor, they could be a mechanic, or if you just talk them in that context, they will be very confident. Now, here's the problem, though. As soon as they get out of that confident context, you put them in a different context, all of a sudden the confidence disappears. Because they're not actually confident in themselves. They're confident in the competency that
the knowledge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the knowledge, the skill set, whatever they've developed. So one of the ways you can develop confidence is actually understand what happens, like studying the economy. There are a lot of people who don't actually have a lot of confidence in themselves, but they understand the patterns. They're around people who are doing things that they, and then part of the reason why I have confidence is because I'm always around business owners. I get a lot of live feedback. Most of my clients are business owners and investors, and I see the ups and downs of the whole thing, and I'm a business owner. So, and part of it is develop competence.
Yeah, like I say that all the time, it's a knowledge gap. So when you do not know something and when you do not have enough knowledge about something, you're hesitant, you're fearful, and then you're not confident enough to take action. And that's what happens in the real estate too. When you're educating the investors and some of the newer investors, it's a whole learning curve for them and for us as well as the syndicators or the investor relations to educate them to figure out, what is missing in their story, where you can add value to mitigate that gap that they are just getting out of the box, or they are just breaking that particular limitation that they have in their life. So let me talk about the emotional intelligence. That's the other thing that you talk about.
Can I just add one more point on confidence?
Sure, please go ahead.
Very important. So the more important confidence is actually a deeper confidence that you can develop, and that's not connected to context or competency per se. It's more of an internal competency where, like, you will hear the statement, a lot of people who are confident, they will say is that, well, I believe that I can figure it out, or I believe in my ability that I can do this. They might not know anything about that specific context, but they have more of a confidence in their own inner ability. It's an internal competence that they have. And that type of, I think that type of confidence is much more powerful, because then you don't, and I've seen this in action, like somebody will come from a completely different space. They will come into, like most, for example, multifamily investors will come from different professions. They come into the space. Most of them will wait until they develop all the competence. They know this thing inside out. They will spend years, months and years researching this, right? Which is okay. But then every now and then, 1 in 1,000 people, maybe somebody will come in. They've literally just heard it on a podcast that there's a way to invest like this. They will come in. They will jump in, talk to some very influential people, and they will build connections and relationships. And before you know it, within 6 months, they have like a 300 unit. Like, it's the most mind-boggling thing. They had virtually very little. They just found out about this thing, but they had more of a confidence in themselves. That can take you much farther. And that kind of confidence actually develops when you understand your own. And this is why where coaching and training and personal development comes in. That you understand your own emotions, you understand your mind, you understand your own thinking. You don't buy into a lot of the negativity. You understand how to differentiate when people say certain things, for whether it's real or not, it's actually happening. You have more of and goes very well into emotional intelligence, is that you have a higher level of emotional intelligence, but wisdom and skill sets in yourself, mostly in how to manage yourself versus in the environment. That kind of confidence will take you to a lot of places. Because
you learn faster too that way, because you believe in yourself, because you have the I can do attitude. So it's very important in any situation. So let's talk about the emotional intelligence, and everybody's talking about emotional intelligence these days. What is your perspective on that, and how that helps one to excel in their life?
So do you know about Gary Vee?
Yes, I do.
So he was interviewed. I really loved this interview. He was interviewed by Larry King, or the late Larry King now, I think. He was asked, he's like, what makes you a really powerful business owner, CEO, very successful person. And out of all the answers he could have given, he's like, emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I know how people work. I know how to empathize with people. I know how to connect with people. I know how to process my own stuff. I don't just react.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very powerful statement. And he even questioned in my end, like, out of all the things that you're saying, like, do you think that's what it is? He's like, no, I know that that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, and then he talks to people constantly. He puts himself in situations that is incredibly uncomfortable. He has done things that, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in, is that, and connects back to fear, is that how much do we understand our own system? Because if we don't understand our physiology, our mind, our consciousness, how our thinking and perception works, then we will fall into pretty much anything. Mm-hmm. Anybody can show anything. We live in the world of technology. We live in the world of illusions. Anybody can show you a picture, a video, a documentary. I'll tell you a story. It was really funny. One of my family members, he came in one day, and he's really big on like health, like bodybuilding and all this stuff. He had watched a documentary on I think it was on vegan or vegetarian. It was the one, and I watched a bunch of these documentaries. He's like, we shouldn't eat this, we shouldn't eat that, and I'm like, and I know what they do in these documentaries, and it's not a statement for vegans or vegetarians or meat eaters. It's just that you're convincing people, right? So you present the case, exactly. You present evidence. You're only presenting mostly your side for the most part, right? So I told him, like, just watch. I gave him a couple other documentaries. I didn't say anything. I'm like, just watch these ones. He goes and watches it. He's like, oh, well, I don't know what to believe anymore.
That's so true. I remember that my dad used to do that. He heard in the news or somewhere eggs are good, so he'll start eating eggs. And he heard, okay, milk is not good, he'll stop drinking milk. And every year or 6 months, he's changing his diet based on that, what other people are saying. Like, no, you shouldn't do that. You should listen to your body and see what you need. It's like, oh, no, this is wrong. I said, this is all gimmick, like whenever they wanted to increase their sale, they'll come up with some fact, something. And it happens all the time because we've been played all these years, all the time, because somebody's trying to manipulate the human brain, because certain things work certain way. We are wired, all the conditioning around us. And most people react versus responding. And it's very important to understand the difference between the reaction and the response. Reaction is the automated response that's generated in your mind because of your past experiences. But the situation could be different this time that you're reacting to it, but it could be a little bit similar to the past. But what's going to happen is reaction is going to be same. But if you take a pause and look at the situation, then you'll be able to make a decision, whether I should respond to the situation or I let go, or I should respond in a certain way. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yes. And like, I love that you brought up like how these things, and especially when you look at the world of food or like more transitory stuff, in the sense that like, especially the world that we live in, everybody has an idea for food. And that's why one of the weirdest statements that I've heard from people when they say, I believe in science, I'm like, science is not about belief. You do know that, right? It's about experimentation.
Exactly.
It's constantly trying to disprove itself. Uh-huh. It's constantly evolving. Mm-hmm. It's actually, as soon as you bring belief into it, then you've misunderstood science. And I've had so many people, it's like, well, I don't want to talk to you because I believe in science because you're saying something outside the scope of science. I'm like, how do you know that? So now people take temporary things and they kind of project them on to permanent things. This is where tradition is actually very powerful. Like, there are things that human beings have done for a long time. They can be very helpful in kind of pointing us in the right direction. Mm-hmm. So when somebody says, don't drink milk, yes, I get that there's evidence that's coming out that it causes inflammation, but then try to explain to me, how come these cultures have been consuming that and they've been fine all along? and which and then there are also studies that disprove what you're saying. How do you deal with that? But people kind of confirm their own biases. And to be honest, a lot of stuff you won't be able to make up your mind about, because from a research point of view, it's ongoing. It's like every 6 months, like you said, there will be a new thing that's going to come up because it's accelerating. But we also know certain things based on our tradition. But what I loved what you said is your body will communicate with you a lot of times.
Exactly, because everybody's different. It's not a cookie cutter, you know.
It isn't, because your body has its own unique structure as well, even though it's similar to other human beings. It has its unique way of responding to different situations. For example, sleep. So on average, the sleep statistics is that you need about 8 hours of average. And sometimes I cringe when say, well, you should get 8 hours of sleep. I'm like, oh, that's a statistical number. It's not for every person. So every human being will have to do their own experimentation as to how their body responds. For example, if I sleep more than about 7.5 hours on average, I'll be groggy. Like I won't. There are people who need about 9 hours of sleep. There are people who can manage very well with 6 hours of sleep. It will be very unique to your own physiology. And you need to pay attention to that. So ultimately, this is why like awareness is very important. I think it was one writer who said that most people don't think because it's actually takes a lot of energy to think.
I agree on that.
It's easy to react, right?
Yeah, it's lazy, you know, okay, I have this automated response, this coming to my mind, I need to spit it out. So that's what happens most of the time. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, I mean, I know we are out of time, but, you know, you are a powerhouse of knowledge. So I have to ask you this question. You know, in these times, I would say the critical times, you know, people always talk about, you know, like live your vision or live the life of your vision. So in these critical times, I would say, how can somebody have the courage to move forward and not worry about the results? You know, like we talk about the economy, it has an upward trend, downward trend, and it's going to pay off eventually for our actions. But how can you have the mindset or the courage to move forward, given all the media, whatever is throwing at us, you know?
So actually, I'll tell you, I had a conversation with one of my clients the other day, and this guy is like one of the most amazing people I know. Like he left everything, he traveled the world, he made enough to just see so many parts of the world. He was part of so many communities, and he came back and he was having a challenge around like, if I do this thing, if I move this thing and commit to this thing, then these are the risks. He was kind of trying to compute the whole thing. And then same with his relationship. He's like, I don't know if I want to get into this relationship. And I knew what it was. He was just afraid. It wasn't a thing. It sounds like he was thinking about it, but he was just afraid. And here's what makes this so ridiculous. Life is incredibly unpredictable. Mm-hmm. If you kind of go out of your comfort zone, like if you walk outside, you have no idea what's going to happen. You generally know, like you're going to go outside, things will be okay. But if you've ever traveled to different parts of the world, you will know that when you go there, a lot of things are unpredictable. No matter how much planning you've done, a big part of it will be unpredictable. Life is like that. Business is like that. There's risk involved. There's unpredictability, uncertainty. In fact, that's what makes it more interesting. That's what makes it more challenging. That helps us grow. And then over time, and that's what wisdom is, that you can see more patterns. So you're able to kind of anticipate in a sense. But until you have it, there is no way to kind of know ahead of time that this is going to happen. You can set up all kinds of equations in your head, but you're afraid to move forward, right? So nobody can predict what's going to happen. But we know certain things, and human beings have known this for a long time. That's why we have phrases like, well, anything will be risky, but it's those who take the risks that move ahead. Those who take a chance, they move ahead. Those who feel fear and they take action, they move ahead. And that's, in fact, one of the most common definitions of courage is that courage is not that you don't feel fear. It's that despite the fact that you feel it, you still move ahead. And that's actually a very human thing. And the reason for that is that human beings have been taking risks for a long time, like since the beginning of dawn of our species. Like think about people going on a voyage when we thought that the world was flat. and they knew that they were, in their mind at least, they knew that they were going to fall over. Think about the times when we crossed continents. Think about the times we just left and just settled in different places and we don't know this place. Think about the technologies that we've developed. Like, human beings know how to take risks, and our ability to adapt is one of the most powerful things. Now, every individual has that within them. And going back to our last conversation, we've been conditioned to stay more in the survival mode.
That's true.
Otherwise, you have it within yourself that if you actually acknowledge it, that I've gotten over a lot of things, why can't I take this other risk? And what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen? I'm going to lose some money. I'm going to lose a little bit of time. But what do you gain out of it? You gain experience, skill sets, you gain awareness, you gain wisdom. Those are invaluable.
That's so true. And I agree on that 100%. I have seen in my life, people who takes things as is, without any expectations or without adding any bells and whistles, like they have some pre-notions, like this thing will happen this way, I'll react to it this way kind of thing. If you take things as is, the results are always good because you are not writing your story before even starting. What happens if we write the story to the completion before we want it to start? We don't even start with the fear then because we are just worried about the outcome of the story. Well, this is really good and we are really out of time. So I'm going to ask you, share one golden nugget with me, please.
Golden nugget around what?
Anything on life, on real estate, on your experience that could help my audience to evolve.
I would say, I think a life well lived is a life where you take chances. Ultimately, because without you taking chances on, it takes courage to love. It takes courage to build a business. It takes courage to invest. It takes courage to move to a new place. It takes courage to be yourself or to be a better version of yourself. It takes courage to even express your heart to somebody. Everything takes courage. And there's a reason for that. And so if you're not taking those chances, you're limiting yourself to a very small little box in your comfort area, which might give you comfort, but it won't give you growth. It won't give you experiences. It won't tap into the range of emotions that you have around excitement and joy, and even fear, anger, frustration, all of that stuff. That's a life full of. It won't put you in situations where you're going to have to adapt and learn and grow. And ultimately, that's what life is like. All you have to do is study some of the people that you admire the most. You will find that their life is very interesting and they took a lot of chances. And that's why you admire them. That's why you're inspired by them. You can be that person. And I'll quote Eckhart Tolle, who says, don't study the Buddha, be the Buddha.
That's so true. I agree on that 100%.
Live as if it's you take full responsibility for your life. And you will see it in your own experience that life is worth living versus this predictable thing that you're taught to follow that's safe, that feels safer. I think it's an illusion. It feels safer, but you will get bored. You will feel resentful. You will feel disconnected. Mm-hmm. And over time, it just as you get older and older, life becomes more and more pointless.
Boring, kind of. Yeah, I agree on that. Wow, thank you so much. That was just so many golden nuggets in this episode. And I would love to have you back. And I'm going to look forward to have you back, Faisal. So let's do another topic pretty soon in the coming weeks. And thank you for being with me today. But before we go, can you share your contact information with my audience if somebody would like to reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. And just to circle back to the bio, some of those things have recently changed. So I actually have a mastermind for multifamily real estate investors. I focus on the coaching, but I have very successful investors that do the mentorship on the real estate side. So you can find out everything about me. Go to faisalensaun.com. Some of the things might not be updated. You can book a quick conversation with me if you want to find out if you want to find out how you can be supported to accelerate your path. Ultimately, coaching is about accelerating your path, whether it's in your business, your personal growth, and your relationships. You can just have a conversation with me. I'll either support you if I have the right program or bandwidth, or I'll connect you with the right people because I'm fairly connected in the coaching world.
Thank you so much, Faisal. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me, Vinky. It's such a pleasure.